What if the reason this engine disappeared is the same reason it became legendary? Because for over 2 decades, BMW built a machine that did not behave like anything else on the road. It did not chase numbers. It did not demand constant attention. It just kept going mile after mile, year after year, quietly building a reputation. Most engines could never touch. But here is the twist. The very decisions that made it nearly indestructible also made it impossible to evolve. In this video, we are unpacking how the flying brick reached that level of durability, what made it so different from everything around it, and the real reason BMW had no choice but to walk away from it. And by the end of this, you might start to wonder, was this engine ahead of its time or trapped by it? To understand why it existed at all, we have to look at the corner BMW had backed itself into. By the late 1970s, the rules of motorcycling had already changed, and BMW was no longer the one setting them. For years, they had built their reputation on air-cooled boxer twins, machines designed to last, engineered with patience, built with margins that favored longevity over everything else. And for a long time, that approach worked. Riders trusted them, but the world around them did not stand still. Manufacturers like Honda, Yamaha, and Kawasaki were moving in a completely different direction. Inline-4 engines, higher rev ceilings, smoother delivery, electric starters, disc brakes. What once felt advanced quickly became expected, and they were delivering it faster and at a price more riders could justify. BMW's machines started to feel heavy, conservative, out of step. This was not just competition, it was a shift in expectations. Riders were no longer choosing motorcycles based on how long they might last. They were choosing based on how they felt right now. And that exposed a deeper problem. BMW had not just fallen behind in performance, they were anchored to a philosophy built for a different era. Small upgrades would not fix it. The gap was no longer mechanical, it was fundamental. That pressure did not just demand improvement, it demanded a completely different way of thinking. Because fixing the old system was no longer enough, BMW had to look beyond motorcycles entirely. And naturally, that search for a new answer leads us to the next step forward, where the roots of the flying brick begin. Not on 2 wheels, but inside an unexpected automotive experiment. And if you are the kind of rider who values an engine that just shows up every single day, does not complain, and keeps stacking miles without drama, hit that like button, drop a hype, and subscribe. That is exactly what keeps us committed to breaking down machines that were built with real responsibility, not just marketing numbers. That pressure did not just push BMW to improve, it forced them to look somewhere they had never seriously considered before. Not at other motorcycles, but at cars, because when they stepped back and studied the problem, one truth became hard to ignore. Motorcycle engineering at that time was evolving in small steps. Meanwhile, the automotive world had already solved problems bikes were still struggling with: heat control, long-term durability under constant load, smooth multi-cylinder operation that could run day after day without breaking down. So BMW made a decision that went against instinct. They stepped outside the category entirely. Inside their own automotive division, they saw something different. Engines designed not just to perform, but to endure. Built to cover hundreds of thousands of miles without needing to be opened. Consistent, predictable, controlled. That changed the target. Instead of chasing speed, BMW began chasing longevity. And somewhere in that shift, an unusual idea started to take shape, partly influenced by an experimental concept tied to Peugeot. It was not a motorcycle engine, but it introduced something that stuck: a compact, liquid, cooled inline layout built for balance and durability. It was not exciting, but it was built to last. And for BMW, that was the turning point. Because they were no longer trying to improve motorcycles, they were about to redefine what one could be. And from that mindset, the foundation of the K series was born, not as a performance machine, not as a marketing statement, but as a long-term solution to a very real threat. So now I am curious, have you ever ridden or owned something that clearly borrowed from car-level engineering? Something that just felt overbuilt compared to everything else? Drop it in the comments, because real-world experience like that says a lot more than spec sheets ever will, and it helps everyone understand what actually holds up over time. Looking at cars gave BMW a new direction, but ideas alone do not change the game. What truly redefined the flying brick was how those ideas were translated into metal and motion. And without stretching the moment any further, That transformation takes us directly to the next chapter, where the engine's unusual sideways design begins to explain everything. When the first K-Series prototype finally took shape inside BMW, it did not just look different, it challenged everything riders thought an engine should be. Because instead of standing upright like every other machine of its time, this one was laid flat on its side. A horizontal inline engine, long, rectangular, almost industrial. At a glance, it looked completely out of place. But that sideways layout was not about appearance. It was about control. Most motorcycles route power through a series of direction changes. The crankshaft spins across the frame, and energy has to be redirected before it ever reaches the rear wheel. Every change introduces friction, loss, and long-term wear. BMW removed that complexity. They rotated the engine so the crankshaft ran front to back, perfectly aligned with the bike itself. Power no longer zigzagged through the machine. It moved in a straight line, from engine to transmission to a sealed shaft drive. This became the compact drive system, and it changed everything. Fewer exposed components, less maintenance, far fewer weak points over time. Out on the road, the difference felt immediate. No chain lash, no abrupt jolts, just a steady, uninterrupted drive that felt almost effortless. But the real advantage was not smoothness, it was endurance. Because when power flows cleanly, the entire system lives an easier life. And reworking the layout solved how power moved through the machine. But movement alone does not guarantee longevity, because even the smartest design can wear out if the materials cannot keep up. And that is exactly where the next answer reveals itself, inside the surfaces you never see, where BMW introduced solutions, like Nikasil, that quietly change how engines age. By the time BMW finalized the structure of the K-Series engine, they had already solved how power would move through the machine. But a far more dangerous enemy still remained: heat. Because in any engine, failure rarely begins with a single breakdown. It builds quietly through uncontrolled temperature. Excess heat degrades oil, distorts metal, and slowly shifts tolerances until wear accelerates beyond recovery. If the goal was extreme longevity, temperature control became the foundation. So BMW moved away from air cooling and adopted a full liquid system. Coolant circulated continuously, stabilizing the engine within a controlled range under all conditions. Fluctuation was replaced with consistency. Then came material choice. Aluminum construction allowed heat to dissipate rapidly, preventing localized stress over time. But the defining detail sat inside the cylinders. Nikasil coating created a surface resistant to wear, reducing friction and preserving compression. This is where the philosophy reveals itself. Not just performance, controlled aging. And that only matters once it proves itself on the road. When the BMW K100 arrived in the early 1980s, it did more than introduce a new motorcycle. It validated an entirely different way of thinking. This was the first production machine to fully embody the flying brick philosophy. At its core sat a liquid-cooled inline four, positioned along the side, delivering power in a controlled, measured way. Not aggressive, not urgent, intentional, and that defined the experience. The K100 was built for riders who valued distance over intensity. On the road, power came smoothly, without spikes or harshness. The bike felt stable, composed, and effortless at speed. It did not demand attention. It rewarded consistency. Over time, riders recognized what it offered. Not excitement in short bursts, but confidence across long journeys. It proved something simple. Endurance could matter more than speed, but not every rider prioritized the same qualities. And that shift leads directly to the next machine. And let me ask you this. Have you ever seen what heat actually does to an engine over time? Warped parts, worn cylinders, constant maintenance? Share your experience in the comments, because understanding how engines fail is exactly what makes solutions like Nikasil and proper heat control stand out even more. If the BMW K100 proved the concept could survive, the BMW K75 proved it could evolve. At first glance, it seems simpler. One less cylinder, less output, a smaller presence overall. But that misses the intention. BMW was not chasing more power. They were chasing refinement. By transforming the inline layout into a three-cylinder design and adding a counterbalancer, they reduced vibration to an almost unnoticeable level. Not just smooth for its type, but smooth in a way that redefined expectation. On the road, the difference was immediate. Where the K100 felt mechanical and grounded, the K75 felt almost weightless in its delivery. The engine faded into the background, and that changed everything. Less vibration meant less fatigue, Longer rides felt easier, more natural, less demanding. It was not built to impress, it was built to disappear. And when placed beside its sibling, that contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Put the BMW K75 and the BMW K100 on paper, and the distinction seems straightforward. One offers more cylinders, more output, more presence. The other appears simpler, lighter, more restrained. But that clarity fades the moment you ride them. The K100 delivers a steady, commanding pull. Its four-cylinder engine provides effortless momentum, especially across long distances. It feels composed, carrying speed with a sense of quiet authority. Then the K75 changes the perspective. It is not about what it lacks, but how it delivers. The three-cylinder setup reduces vibration to a remarkable degree, creating a smooth, almost seamless flow of power. At speed, the engine becomes nearly invisible, and that defines the divide. The K100 emphasizes strength. The K75 emphasizes precision. One supports endurance through power, the other through refinement. Yet this comparison only explains preference, because both machines share something far more significant, and that is where their reputation truly begins. Up to this point, everything about the Flying Brick sounds impressive. Precise engineering, strong durability, careful design. But this is where the story crosses into something far more extreme. Because its reputation was not built in controlled environments, it was built on the road over time by riders who kept pushing without reaching a limit. For most motorcycles, reaching 100,000 miles signals wear, components begin to show fatigue, rebuilds become expected. For the K series, that point meant very little. Machines continued far beyond it. 150,000, 200,000, still running on original internals, still delivering consistent performance. Then come the figures that feel unrealistic. 400,000 miles, documented, repeated, and verified. At that stage, durability no longer explains it. It becomes endurance. BMW acknowledged this reality through the BMW Million Mile Award, recognizing riders who reach distances most vehicles never approach. And that is what defined it. Not a claim, but a pattern. And comparing them reveals preference, but it does not explain reputation. Because whether riders chose power or smoothness, both versions shared something far more important. And that shared trait is exactly what pulls us into the next chapter, where the Flying Brick stops being impressive and starts becoming almost unbelievable in terms of longevity. At first glance, the answer feels simple. If the engine was so capable, why not keep improving it? Add power, refine it, push it forward, because the reality was far less flexible. The Flying Brick had already reached its natural limit. Its sideways inline layout, which gave it balance and durability, also imposed strict physical boundaries. Space was fixed. Expanding displacement or increasing output was not a simple adjustment. It required reworking the entire structure around it. And meaningful power gains do not come from minor changes. They demand deeper transformation. The BMW K100 was already near that ceiling. More power meant higher stress, reduced longevity, or added weight. Each path worked against the very qualities that defined it. The BMW K75 faced an even narrower margin. Its design favored smoothness over expansion, leaving little room for performance growth. At the same time, competitors were advancing rapidly. Lighter machines, higher revving engines, and designs built to evolve with each generation. BMW was refining a platform already optimized for a different purpose. And that is where the shift begins. The engine was not failing. It had simply stopped growing. And in a market driven by constant progress, that created pressure from every direction. By the time the Flying Brick had proven it could outlast almost anything on the road, the world it was built for was already disappearing. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily in ways that were far harder to fight. Across the United States and Europe, emission standards were tightening with a kind of precision that left very little room for legacy designs. Engines were no longer judged only by how long they could run, but by how cleanly they could do it, how efficiently they burned fuel, how controlled the combustion process remained, and how well they handled the byproducts no one used to think about. And this is where the Flying Brick began to face something it could not simply out-engineer, because its limitations were no longer mechanical, they were structural. That sideways engine layout, the same design that once gave it balance, durability, and a unique identity, now worked against it. Modern catalytic systems require exact placement, close enough to heat quickly, yet positioned to manage airflow and avoid trapping excessive temperature. On this platform, achieving that balance was never straightforward. Every adjustment created tension somewhere else. Packaging grew tighter, airflow became harder to manage. Heat started to build in places it was never meant to stay, and heat changes everything. Because cleaner engines do not just run differently, they run hotter. Catalytic converters generate their own thermal load, and when that heat has nowhere to go, it begins to affect more than emissions. It starts influencing reliability, rider comfort, and the overall character of the machine. BMW could refine around it, improve fuel control, adjust components, optimize what already existed. But they were working around a foundation that had been designed for a completely different set of expectations. To truly meet the next wave of standards, this engine would not need an upgrade. It would need to be reimagined from the ground up. And that realization quietly changed the direction. Because once you reach the point where adaptation turns into reinvention, you are no longer preserving a legacy, you are replacing it. But even then, engineering challenges alone do not end something this proven. Because if the demand is still there, solutions are always found. The real turning point comes when the demand itself begins to shift. And that shift in mindset is exactly what leads us into the next chapter, where the market does not just challenge the flying brick, it begins to leave it behind. Because by the early 90s, the most important change was no longer happening inside the engine. It was happening inside the rider. For years, machines like the flying brick were built around a clear promise. Go the distance, stay composed, and never ask for more than fuel and time. And for a long stretch, that promise was enough. Riders valued stability. They respected consistency. They trusted something that felt unbreakable. But slowly, that question began to change. Not how far can it go, but how does it feel getting there? And that shift rewrote everything. Manufacturers like Honda, Kawasaki, and Yamaha were not just building motorcycles anymore. They were shaping experiences, lighter frames, faster revving engines, sharper responses the moment you touch the throttle. These machines did not wait, they reacted. And next to that new energy, the flying brick began to feel distant, not flawed, not outdated in the traditional sense, but disconnected from what riders were starting to chase. Where others felt agile, it felt grounded. Where others surged forward, it built speed with calm precision. Where others excited, it reassured. And that difference, once its greatest strength, started to work against it. Because the market was no longer rewarding patience, it was rewarding immediacy. Riders were no longer choosing machines based on how long they would last, but how alive they felt in the first few seconds. And in that moment, the comparison shifted in a way the flying brick could not follow. And by this point, that gap had become impossible to ignore, because the flying brick still delivered exactly what it was built for, but the world around it had stopped valuing those same priorities. And that realization leads directly into the next chapter, the moment BMW made a decision that would quietly bring this entire era to an end. If this video is giving you a new perspective, tap that like button, and if you want to go a step further, become a member and get early access to the next breakdowns before anyone else. By 2005, the decision was no longer a question. It was a conclusion that had been forming for years. BMW did not walk away from the flying brick because it broke down. If anything, that is what makes this moment so telling. They stepped away because the world had moved into a space the engine could not follow, no matter how well it was built. And so, the shift began. Not with noise, not with a dramatic announcement, but with a quiet change in direction. BMW turned toward a completely different layout, engines mounted across the frame, designed from the ground up for a new set of expectations. Higher performance ceilings, tighter packaging, cleaner integration with modern systems. This was not an update, it was a reset. The transverse design solved problems the flying brick could only work around. Weight distribution became more balanced. Handling felt lighter, more immediate. Engines could rev higher, produce more power, and respond in ways the old platform was never meant to deliver. Even the invisible details changed. Cooling systems flowed more naturally. Exhaust routing became cleaner. Emissions equipment could be integrated without compromise instead of being forced into place. For the first time in decades, BMW was no longer adapting around a legacy. They were building for what came next. And yet something important carried through. The precision, the durability, The quiet confidence that defined the flying brick did not disappear. It evolved. Because this was never the end of an idea. It was the moment that idea changed form. And the decision to move on may have ended its production, but it did not end its story. And that realization is what brings us to the final chapter, where we step back and understand what this engine truly became. When you step back and take in the full picture, the question begins to change. It was never really, why did BMW stop building the flying brick? Because the deeper truth is far less obvious. It was not discontinued because it failed. It was set aside because it succeeded in a world that no longer valued what it did best. This was never just an engine. It was a statement, a machine built with a different priority, one that placed longevity above trends, consistency above spectacle. It proved that reliability was not a limitation, but a direction, a choice. And for a time, that choice looked almost untouchable. But the world did not stand still. Expectations shifted. Speed began to matter more than distance. Emotion began to outweigh endurance. And in that new environment, the flying brick did not lose its strengths. It simply lost its advantage. Not because it could not keep up, but because the definition of progress had changed. And maybe that leaves us with a different kind of question, not about what was lost, but about what we are willing to leave behind. So if this video made you rethink what reliability actually means and how engineering decisions shape the machines we trust, click the next video to continue the road ahead, where we break down another machine that changed expectations in a completely different way. Join the tribe by subscribing. If you want to support the channel and get early access to the newest deep dives, become a member. And do not forget to like this video, because that is what keeps this kind of content alive.